Daidayu family, and welcome to Dr. Mumbi's spiritual show. Actually, this is an Ask Dr. Mumbi. My name is Dr. Mumbi Seraki. How you doing? How's everything going? I really do pray that you are well in all your ways and that you're moving into living life very much family on your own terms. Let me take this opportunity to thank the sponsors of this show, of course, our Patreon family, and those who send us love donations through PayPal. We appreciate, love you so much. Definitely consider supporting, this channel and other channels that are bringing you the new codes, the new energy. Because there's much more family that is communicated than just my words to you. There's a lot more that happens in these interactions, and putting, inviting that energy from the motherland, from Eden into your homes, into your communities, shifts things. And then when we're sharing all of that, there's such a big consciousness movement family that we can't even comprehend right now. But just because we're not comprehending it doesn't mean it's not happening behind the scenes. But those are stories for other days. So, one of the biggest questions I always get from people is how come, one of the pervading questions, I know you've heard this as well, is why hasn't Africa ever stood up for what happens to our melanated people across the world? Why haven't we stood up to the Americans and told them to let our people go, stop mistreating our African Americans? Why don't we stand up against, many of the atrocities that are being committed, even for the Aborigines in, Australia, for example, who are our kindred melanated global family, and many, many other things. Because Africa remains silent on so many global issues, family. And, the reason is because Africa is not free. Africa is still under colonization, family. Africa is still under a very deep colonization, and it's a running joke among those who get it. Africa right now is still it's a neo-colonial world order that's been there since we gained so-called independence in the 1950s. All our leaders who went to quote unquote Lancaster House in London were also initiated into the brotherhood while they were there. But seriously, not even on that note, but the secret societies, the Masonic orders, these global brotherhoods, which at the core are Luciferians, whether the people, the proxies in these countries know it or not, they're the ones that are running things, family. And you see, colonization is not just something you remove physically. We've never been allowed to remove the mental colonization. We've never been allowed to remove the spiritual colonization. There's a pervasive and sinister agenda to keep the Africans so-called ignorant, to keep them in, to keep us in this lower state of victim mentality, of, oh, this is happening to me, that is happening to me, they're doing this, they're doing that, of keeping us off balance and ignorant and stuck, enslaved to their narrative. That's why they're constantly talking about colonialism and constantly talking about, slavery without even trying to tell us how mighty and great we were. So that's the only character we connect with, a defeated people, a people who are ruled and reigned over. They never tell us about our freedom fighters, but actually it's not even for them to tell. We never tell ourselves about our freedom fighters because we don't recognize the importance of the narrative. But the majority of people, family, on the motherland are totally colonized. Totally. Religious colonization still rules supreme. Most African countries are 90% Christian, 80% Muslim. There's nowhere where the African traditional, spirituality is dominant. And it's funny because the unity communities, a lot of the requests I've gotten have also been from the motherland, from people from Nigeria to Zambia to South Africa to Sierra Leone saying, yo, to Ghana, saying, I've awakened, but I'm so alone. Because we've totally been cloned mentally. As we were celebrating the physical colonization, we didn't pay attention to the solidification of that religion. Because this is not independence, family. Because if we were truly a free people, we wouldn't be allowing the exploitation of our resources. We wouldn't be allowing some of the things that happen. If we had really come back to ourselves, many of the leaders who are leading us today wouldn't even have I say they wouldn't even be leading a village committee, because it was all about morality. Leadership wasn't bought. You didn't sweet talk your way into leadership. You didn't lie your way into becoming a leader of the people. You earned it. Your bloodline earned it and had to safeguard it. And so there's so many things that have been compromised and flipping us on our heads where, before the nation was more important than the individual, but now we're in a reality where the individual, Africans have been taught that the individual is more important than the nation. And so no one will fight for the nation, because what does it benefit me as an individual? I might as well get my money, get my house, get my success, get my prosperity, get my abundance at the cost of others, then think about this nation, because the nation is no longer what's supreme. And that's why the nation remains enslaved. And that's why we as a people remain enslaved. It's been systematically done to us, but we have systematically reinforced it. The few who have the instruments of power have kept their own slaves. They've kept their own people colonized, and some don't even know better. Like, I was shocked to learn, like, even with the pandemic family, how many leaders, their entire bloodlines and families, got the jibby jab VIP. It's like, don't you know what's going on? Don't you read? But I feel like the elite in Africa live in this bubble where they just want to maintain their individual power by any means necessary. They're caught up in the Babylon and being part of Babylon and being part of the success and not the failure of Africa. They want to be rich. They want to dress like Babylon. They want to have cars like Babylon, have houses like Babylon, all of that. And then that spreads to the middle class. And they will do anything, even if it means hurting the group, to maintain this individual power. And there's also this service that I have for anyone trying to relocate to Africa, Karibu Nyumbani. Definitely check it out, family. Join us on Patreon. There's like a library of over 50 videos talking about, just what relocating to the motherland looks like. But even there, I've had a lot of my so-called clients, but a lot of our family who have relocated have talked about how isolating it was. It's like the African, be it the Kenyan, be it the Zambian, be it the Beninois, like, we're beautiful, kind people, but we're so deep asleep. And the annoying thing is, even when you get to some of these, villages and like rural areas, there's still that Mzungu worship. Because their God is a Mzungu. Their God looks like a Mzungu. We don't even understand. You see, the intellectual and the ones who have been exposed, us who are able to watch, you guys who are able to watch me and understand what I'm saying, us who have been exposed to so much information, we take for granted, we even laugh it off, like Mzungu Jesus, whatever. But it's Mzungu Jesus still dominates. Family, I passed a church the other day. They've painted a white Jesus on their walls. They've created stained glass of like white Moses and all this stuff. This is what is still ruling Africa. And the people who have relocated here have even opened my eyes to it further. And we all feel alone because not everyone is thinking like this. Now, at least we know that there's the 100th monkey effect, or Ubuntu, where when a certain number of us, my awakening is for all of us, your awakening is for all of us, and when enough of us awaken, it will awaken the all. Like that is what we push for every day, but it's a struggle on the motherland because we're still colonized. We're still controlled. You think we'd be selling our gold for nothing? You think we'd have all these militaries in like over 80% of African countries have a foreign military presence? You think we'd allow that if we were truly a liberated people? We wouldn't. And so even as we talk, okay, so now we're able to talk. Now we're able to buy land in our nations, but others are able to buy land in our nations and they've already bought the most prime land. There is no freedom, family. You can't be free in your slave master system, in your slave master's narrative. You can't. That's the biggest lie that's been told to our people. And our freedom, our slavery and our colonialism is being reinforced daily through their pillars, the 7 pillars I've talked about, through their government, through how we're educating our children, through even how we take care of our health, how we run our societies, through entertainment, through the government, which is the one that's that's setting up the playing field. You can't be free in your slave master system that even doesn't want to acknowledge that you were ever a slave. They don't want to acknowledge that you were a slave because you still are. They can't pay you reparations because you're still controlled by them. It doesn't even make sense to them. They paid reparations to their own. Wake up, Africa! Welcome back, family, to Ask Dr. Mumbi. My name is Dr. Mumbi Seraki. Our camera just cut off, but I guess that was the end of that little information loop. Of course, we acknowledge our ancestors in the wind. There's so much more about life than we've been told, family. So much more. Like when you turn off that artificial world of Babylon and you connect with the wind, with nature, with the ocean. Like I'm so blessed to live by the ocean where I connect with just the ethers, the sky. It's just it's such a rich life. I understand why our ancient ones lived the way they lived. And they didn't live rough, by the way. A lot of our stuff has been covered. Anyway, I'm not even going to get into, let me just sidestep from that. But before we took the break, I was answering a question that I get all the time is, why hasn't Africa ever reacted to what is happening to the global melanated people? Why doesn't Africa do this? Why does Africa allow themselves to be exploited? Where we're constantly reading about how, the Chinese and the British and the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese are coming and the Russians are coming and they're taking our oil, they're taking our diamonds, they're taking our gold, they're taking this, our people, there's all these, the narrative of the Islamic jihadists and all this craziness, family. Why is the narrative of Africa as it is? It's because first of all, we're not the ones telling our own story. Nearly 80 or 90% of the journalists on the motherland are working for the foreigner. So there's a certain script. And don't forget, the people who report the news, there's always an editor on top who's not just there to check that you're not making mistakes or spelling this wrong or whatever. They're there to make sure that the narrative remains consistent. And because of limited budget of some of our local TV channels, a lot of people just take their news from, their international news or their continental news from the APs of this world, the Associated Press, the Reuters of this world. Those are the ones where they publish all the stories. And then a lot of more than 50% of African news channels will pick those stories from the Reuters and all these of this world and just, reword it or even just give them credit, put it in their newspapers, put it on their news, etc., etc. So there's not even an African source for information. And no one who even has the money to do that is even interested in creating a new narrative, family. But when we look at the story of even independence or the stories of our past, It didn't take everybody, but it took somebody. And I think that's the most important thing, family, is that for us who we know we're the leaders of this generation, we know we're the game changers on the motherland. We know that we're here to shift everything forever and ever. We are the ones now that must find our way to each other and start to create that, because we're trying to take everyone along for the ride and it's not going to work. The Kenyan revolutionaries must somehow find each other. The Kenyan spiritualists must somehow find each other, come together, and come up with a plan of action. It's like one of the great, one of the scriptures you guys love. Is it when King David was going to face the enemy? I don't know if it's King David or who was going to face the enemy, and he had like 30,000 men, and the Most High was like, "That's too many people. Like, you need to reduce it." And so they did this test. Like everyone was sent to a river, and it was how you drank the water. Some drank like dogs, like licking it. Others, with their hands, whatever. And I think he chose one over the other, and he was left with just a couple hundred, and that's all it took to face the thousands and hundreds of thousands of opposition. And so I think a lot of us African revolutionaries, African game changers, the ones that are here, the ancient ones, we must find each other. The reborn ancestors, we must find each other, because a lot of our family are not our family. We need to create soul families. We have strategically been born into nations and places and families, but we have to come together. That's how Babylon started. The families came together. Babylon has been run by like 11 families. This whole thing that they've created is not all the Mzungus. It's literally like a dozen families, and they did it to their own. They oppressed their own first before they copy-pasted that oppression to the world. When you read about the Scottish and the Irish and how they suffered under the British Crown and all these other stories, family. So we're not going to, because of the depth and the fact that we're still enslaved, we're still colonized, because it's a mental thing. So it's like, you guys can be physically free, but you'll never. Why can't we exploit our own resources? Why can't we? There's no car that's built in Africa. There are no guns that are built in Africa. Not that we need guns, but what's happening? Why can't we create our own? It's because we're not even mentally fully there, family. The distortion has been so epic that we're even still trying to find ourselves, and then the world keeps going because of time. Time doesn't stop, for nobody. As they say, the sun doesn't wait for the king. So it's like the world moves on as we're confused and still trying to get it together, and then we're given this false freedom where now we're trying to play in their matrix, and it's crazy because we continuously losing ourselves, we're losing our children, our societies are becoming more corrupt, we're becoming like the worst version of them. Please watch my show that I just did on corruption and how corruption is actually a foreign concept, family. And so it's going to require a radical, not even just a revival, but a radical reformation on the motherland to really put us back on course and get us back onto the timeline. Because you see, we're thinking wrong. We can't even get onto the right timeline. We can't even get into our own narrative. That's why, family, before I used to think it was politics that would change Africa. I thought it was economics. And yes, we can use our economics, our collective economics, to change Africa. But if people don't even get it here first, they won't understand why they need to buy black and support black and make sure that that black is not a proxy, but is actually creating that product from scratch. We won't even understand and understand why collectively we have so much power. Even just on the economic level, it's like our African American brothers and sisters, if they were to unite their dollar, they would shake America, family. And even here on the motherland, there are some people who have become obscenely wealthy to the point where the money is just being hid under their mattresses. But if they were to use those economics to fund some of the revolutionaries, which is probably why they've been bequeathed with that money in the beginning, we'd start to see some kind of change because we're stuck in a loop as a people. And we keep trying to get freedom physically when it's not a physical colonization, it's not a physical liberation that's needed. It's a spiritual one and a mental one where we just need to step back and be silent. And we're not even being given time to do that. But it's not about everybody. It's about somebody doing something to plant a seed, to shift things, and us coming together, family. Even in their distorted scriptures, they always talk of one man. I never tell you about the woman, but I keep saying the female Messiah is here. It will take a group of us to shift everything, coming together, combining our spiritual energy, our mental energy, our networks across the motherland to create the kind of shift. The shift is already happening musically and culturally, but it's at it's at the mercy of the jackals who have always hijacked our liberation process. But we have to move with knowing the motherland is not free. The motherland, that's why they're now talking about how there's a new onslaught on the motherland again. They're coming back. The truth is they never left. And until we accept that and stop with these charades of Independence Day where everyone is dressed, even our army is dressed, we have a Mzungu-looking army, Mzungu-looking everything. Even our leaders dress in suits and everything. Like, that's not us. That's like we're colonized. It's like they laugh and laugh. I'm telling you, those at the top of the pyramid look at Africa and they just laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. And they don't fear the many, because the many they control. But they fear the few, who are the game changers hidden amongst us. Because they know if those people can organize themselves, they'll shift everything. That's why they try and make it seem like Dr. Mumbi, it's all about Kenya. And this other person, it's all about Nigeria. It's all about Ghana. It's all about South Africa. It's all about Zambia. They try and put us in these silos when it's all about all of us. And it just takes me connecting with someone of like mind, a few people of like mind. We don't even need that many, family. Remember, please watch the video I just did. They talked about how one person vibing high on 500 megahertz cancels out 750,000 people vibing low. So we only need a few good men. We only need a few superheroes. And if you look at what Babylon has done with their superhero movies, they tell you that. It's always the few who change the many, or who change the world for the many. And so when we stop concentrating on awakening everybody or shifting everybody's consciousness, and we just concentrate on the few, and the few creating that momentum, that's how we'll reach Ubuntu. But those are stories for other days. Tuko pamoja.